Cass?
Never mind. I pressed the
Okay.
wrong button. I was going to
Oh.
give you a thumbs up.
Thank you. Mission accomplished. Okay. All right. So welcome again. Thanks for joining. We are going to get started with an update, quick update on the advanced query tool. I wanted to talk about our definition for the matrix of runoff and suggest a change to that. Quick item on the active sampler data entry guidance that we've been talking about, and then a little bit longer on an intro to our CEDEN 2.0 field data collection module. So to start off, I just want to note about the advanced query tool. In our January meeting, I mentioned that it's older technology and we were encountering some obstacles that might mean we needed to take it offline sooner than we had, or I had thought or anticipated. We were able to successfully make the updates that, like the critical updates that needed to be made, and move the server to the California data center, or Department of Technology's data center offsite, and that seemed to go okay. And so I think it's stable. And we don't anticipate needing to, at this point, needing to make that quick change that I just gave a warning about last time. So for now, we're looking okay. Any questions on that? Okay, then we'll move on to the matrix definition update. I had a question a couple weeks ago about when to use the matrix of runoff, and I think the question originated because of some municipal separate storm sewer, or MS4 sampling, and they were doing wet weather and dry weather, and it came to my attention that it doesn't really necessarily leave room for dry weather sampling as written. So I was proposing to just add the phrase "or other municipal runoff." And sometimes that's irrigation, like lawn watering overflow, or runoff. And so it could be covered by our existing definition, but I think part of the reason for sampling is to try to determine what it is. And so I wanted to be more inclusive with that and include that phrase, other municipal runoff. Does anybody have any comments or concerns with that suggested change? Okay, great. Then I'll go ahead and ask that to be updated. Moving right along, we have our active sampler data entry guidance. We've talked about this for a few meetings now. I was not able to get a lot of additional information. I did reach out to somebody from the regional board that does some sampling, but they didn't have a established protocol yet. And I didn't really glean any thing that was anything substantial from that exchange. So I pretty much left what we've had. I did go back to having two results from the same event, one being particulate and one being filtered, or dissolved, sorry. And so that the idea is that the water goes through a filter and you analyze that separately, the particulate separately, and then you analyze what sorbed to the media for your dissolved. In my interactions or emails with Dane Harden, who was here I think last time, he had shared concern that if you do present that as a total, you lose your granularity with the MDL and RL. So here I've listed them separately with the dissolved and particulate for the sampling device that with the HLB. It sounded like with the SPEC 18 that you could still present a total concentration in one line. So I was thinking we'd just go with this for now. If we need to add some more nuanced entries, we can as we get more and more familiar with these. But this for now, I think at least provides what we wanted to. The most important parts is that you would be the provider in this case would be giving water concentrations or the concentration of the analyte you're sampling for in a water concentration. Any questions or concerns about that? Okay, great. So now we will move on to our CEDEN 2.0 field data module. Most of you probably are familiar with the fact that we're going through a system update of CEDEN. We've talked about the chemistry module quite a bit. We're still stuck with some of the calculations that we're expecting the system to do for percent recoveries and um, the RPD and other checks. So we're still working through those, and it's unfortunately taking longer than we expected. I'm sure you are all thinking that as well. But as we're working through those, we have also started on our field data collection module. And so I wanted to at least introduce you to what we've worked on so far. The Equus system, which is what we're using for all of CEDEN 2.0, has a application called Collect. And I'll bring that over. It is oh, okay. It is the idea is that you'd have it on a phone or a tablet, but there is a version that you can put on your laptop like I have here. And you'd take your device out in the field and do your data collection. And so I just wanted to run through it with you and get some initial feedback. Currently, it's just in this interface. It isn't mapping to. We haven't mapped it yet to the a EDD format like that you would enter through an Excel document or file. So it's just what you see on the screen here. So it is an application. Before I got to this screen, I had a login screen. I did download it onto my computer here, and then you have a login screen, which everybody that needs to use it will obtain an account, just like for the chemistry module. I just downloaded it yesterday on my computer, so I want to make sure I could get in this morning, and so that's why I didn't show that initial screen. But as soon as I logged in, I was taken to this screen here. And so we're going to go to the this one form. There could be multiple templates to start your form with. We're going to this one. They're about the same because we're just continuing to make changes. You get this. I'm getting this pop-up right now because it's not a published form because we're just testing things out. So it's just warning me that, you know, don't put real data because it may not go anywhere. we go. As we still are in kind of setting it up, we plan to get rid of this second row here that says ref values don't touch. That's just to help us with our reference values, but that will go away once we get into production. And so then we have general information. I click on new. You get this screen where you get to make your selections. I'm just going to pick the first things that are coming up to, but they're a lot of the same types of values that you should be used to in current CEDEN. We have some defaults here, geometry shape. We're showing it, but we're defaulting it to point since that's usually what it is. Same thing with location code. At this point in the, this is part of why I wanted to get your feedback, is to see, if people thought it was appropriate to default to bake, for example. But we continue through selecting the values to make this first general information sheet complete. This may be something new to some people with the precipitation. It's something that is on the swamp field sheets. So we want to be able to better correlate the weather with the dry weather versus wet weather sampling, and we thought by presenting the question that is not required, but at least presenting it, be easy to just say, yeah, it's raining right now, and that would be an easy way to make sure that we could say whether it was a wet weather or dry weather event, which we've had a lot of interest in the last 24 hours. We say that it's less than an inch. So that's it for this first general information form, and I'll go on. There's several different subforms, but before I go on, Joel, did you have a question?
Yeah, so I'm part of a volunteer community group, and we go out and we collect water. We were out yesterday, kayaks, boats, all sorts of things. And the city of Oxnard kind of take cares of it, but we send all of our samples to a few labs. And we have a big problem getting data uploaded to CEDEN. Some of the data gets uploaded, sometimes it can take months. Sometimes it's incorrect project codes, so on. It's just been a real problem. And I was wondering if this might provide a way where we could do our own uploading of data.
Yeah, that's the idea for field samples, measurements you take out in the field. This would be your mechanism to enter it into the database. Once we get it all set up, it's just, this is more than a mock-up, but as I mentioned, it's not mapped to the database yet, so we still have a ways, but yeah, this would be a way to do that.
Well, if you want to do any field testing or, have some, anyone experiment with putting in our data, we'd be happy to participate to help you improve the product or test it out.
Okay, thank you, Joel. Keep that in mind. Kelly.
I was just curious about the 1 inch. What was the reason for using that as the less than and the greater than?
I believe Tessa from our Swamp IQ group just used what was on. Oh, there's Tessa. Maybe
Yeah.
you just used what was on the existing form.
Exactly. Yeah. But that doesn't mean we could add other options. if folks are interested in that. I think the idea, I mean, there's a few choices there. But I know other people have different like certain trigger levels for stormwater runoff, like a 1/4 inch or so we can certainly change that field, but that's just kind of our existing those are our existing variable codes that we use right now.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good. I was looking at it from a stormwater perspective, and
Yeah.
most of what we deal with, it's 0.1, or used to be
0.1.
0.25 for some, but now it's
Oh,
0.1
wow.
for
Where
a
are
lot
you?
of
Are you in Southern or North?
yeah,
Okay.
Ventura County.
SoCal.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's definitely the kind of thing we can take feedback on. Another question I have is I feel like a lot of stormwater folks, especially you're just marking out like this is my dry event sampling versus this is my storm event sampling. So I guess I was also wondering like we could just have a button like dry or wet as another option in addition to these. So we're taking input right now.
I like the idea of a button. And I mean, if it had a comment field associated with it, you could um, you could add what counts as a wet event, maybe, or a trigger, or if it's more for yeah, I'm not sure how important that part is, but for those reviewing, uh, I like the idea of being able to flag it as wet or dry. That's something that we've struggled with a lot with entering our data, because for us, the water quality objectives, are different for wet weather versus dry weather for a lot of parameters. So it's kind of important to be able to interpret what event that data was collected from, what type of event.
Okay, yeah, I think I like both of those. So adding the button just to easily demarcate like this was, I mean, not everybody is doing dry versus wet, but for those who are, this would be an option that you could mark. And then adding the comment field to describe more about it. Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Adam, did you have your hand up?
I did. Basically, this conversation is making me think about the earlier discussion where it was, we wanted to make sure that the dry season sampling wasn't excluded from runoff, but is the solution, instead of making both wet and dry season the same runoff matrix, adding a new matrix for dry season runoff so that like you handle that they're both included, but also this sort of being able to distinguish the two problem?
I would worry that you may not know if you're sampling as a storm drain. Let me think about that a little more. But I'll write it down. Thanks.
Okay.
Joel.
Yeah, I just wanted to amplify what Alan was saying. So when, like yesterday, when there was a lot of rain, the bacteria count goes through the roof because of some of the storm drains and the sewer system overflowing, and we get human stuff in. When it's dry weather, it's all from irrigation. We see the like nitrates going through the roof. So we can tell from the analytes where the water was coming from, but it would be really useful to know if we were seeing flow from irrigation versus flow from weather.
Okay, so that goes along with Adam's comment. All right.
I sorry, I forgot to put my hand up, but I
Yeah.
second that as well. That it would be helpful for us for the program to have one that is rain versus one that is not rain. You know, irrigation water would probably end up being classified with other municipal runoff in the way that we approach what we're sampling, and then precipitation is separate. So I don't know how easy it is to parse that out since there's so much historic data in there.
Yeah. But if you go and sample today with, or maybe a couple days ago when it wasn't raining right then, but you're still maybe getting inflows from a rain event, there may also be other stuff in there that is not rainwater. So it seems like you still won't necessarily know everything that's in there, and that if yeah, I guess that's just my concern. But we'll continue on our sheet. So we'll save this first subform. I did go through it yesterday, so that's why you see this second one, but we'll go to the subforms for the one that I just created. And we have these 4 subforms: location parameters, field measurements, lab sample collection, and field observations. One thing we wanted to get feedback on is the order of those subforms, and you may get a better idea as I go through them, but keep that in mind. So for the location parameters, we have this feature to collect your latitude and longitude. It on my phone, it works fine. It set me where I was. On my computer here, it's putting me in Rome, I think, and so it doesn't work as well. But you can scroll across the ocean and get to where you are. I'm not going to take that time. I'll just say that I'm sampling in Rome. We've changed this GPS device to a free text field. So I'll just say my laptop, or if you're on your phone, you can say your phone. If you don't use this feature and want to type it in, then you can overwrite like this coordinate source of map, for example, that defaulted when I selected the point using the map that popped up. My elevation, it filled in the datum again because I used the map feature, and then I can add any comments. And so that's this locations form, subform. And moving on to the field measures, field measurements. So this is when you're actually taking measurements out in the field. So again, we've defaulted a lot of this matrix fraction sample type collection method, but you can change it. For example, if you're taking a field duplicate, you change the sample type. Collection device. Currently, this is a controlled vocabulary item, but we're changing it to a collection or a free text field. So you just, whatever you've named your device, you can put that in. And so you no longer have to go through the steps of getting that added to your vocabulary. Then we have calibration date. Oops, and it should pop up with a calendar here. And again, a comment field. Now we have implemented something that we've talked about here, and when we get to the collection for a lab, both places we have a field collection start and end time. And so if you're doing a collection that takes multiple hours or days, like an active sampler, you'll be able to indicate that. I'm just going to pick right now, and then I'm just doing a grab, so I'm not going to put an end time. Same thing with collection depth. We've made it so you can have a depth integrated sample. You can indicate your starting depth as well as your ending depth and indicate your units. And we're keeping position in water column, but defaulting it to subsurface. But it's you can select the same options that we have now if you don't want to use subsurface. And then for the field results themselves, none of these are required fields. So whatever you happen to be measuring, you can enter that. 0.5, and I'm going to say I didn't sample for the rest of those. But we have dissolved oxygen, conductivity, turbidity, velocity in feet per second, and additional field measures. This hasn't quite been built out yet, but the idea is that we're going to have a list of other parameters that might be sampled out in the field, but without creating them in this form setup where it's predetermined. You'd be able to select the parameter and the units and then enter your value. And then we'll go ahead and save. Joel, did you have another question?
Yeah, so every month we collect exactly the same spot, so the same long, the same depth, the same instruments, etc. The only thing that's going to change is date, time, and all of the results. Is there an easy way to pull it up and change it and save it with a new date, or do you have to re-enter all of that information every time?
Tessa, do you know, can you just keep your like location form and just create new subforms for the measurements?
I'm not sure. That's a great question, because I think that is the functionality a lot of people would want. There's lots of people who go out to the same sites. We're still in the early development stages here, but we'll definitely ask that of our software folks and see what the possibilities are.
Great,
And
thank you.
we'll try to test that out. But that's, yeah, a really good question, and I hope we can.
Okay.
Thanks, Stacy, and then Adam.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Stacy?
Hi, Jarma. I just have a question about the fraction. You have it defaulted to total. Is it no longer going to be linked to a constituent? Because the field measures that you have listed, some have a fraction of total now, and like temperature and pH are still just none. Right? So if you put total, these are all going to get total, I'm assuming.
We were even considering not even having fraction for field measures.
Right.
So that's our, it's a good question. We were still thinking that one through. So
Okay.
but yes, I agree that so fraction is no longer, is not going to be part of constituents in the new system. But I agree, we wouldn't want total applied to all those measures if it doesn't make sense to them. So I think we just need to think that part through and maybe just remove fraction as the easiest solution to that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I think part of more we were focused on whether there'd be cases where you'd be sampling for dissolved out in the field. And I don't think we had good cases either way. So I think that would be more the worry, that we wouldn't be capturing that if we got rid of fraction. Adam?
Thanks, Sharma. I just want to clarify, this isn't the only way to enter field data, I'm assuming.
There will still be a like Excel based format like chemistry.
Okay. Because I was just thinking, like, in Joel's case, like if they went through this process once, and then if they could export that as an Excel format, and then all they would have to do is change those handful of fields each time that he talked about. That might be one option if there isn't like an application based way of reusing a subform.
Yeah, okay, that's a good point. Marco?
Yeah, hi, Jarma. How do you enter field replicates in this case?
Under sample type. So for field measurements, you could choose a sample type of field measure duplicate or field measure triplicate.
And then do you make a new subform, or do you add it as an additional parameter when we have that functionality? This is why we come to the group.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, we haven't actually, I wouldn't even say we're in testing phase, we're in development phase. So these are good questions and we will need to actually test them. But thank you all. So that's a good, we should make sure that makes sense and flows when you want to do an initial measure and then you want to do a duplicate, like how does that save and how does that look? We will test that.
Yeah.
And bring this back to you all.
Adam, is your hand up from your previous question?
Just stayed up, yeah.
Okay. All right, so now we're on to our next form. You can see here that it provides a little grid of the items that I've entered, and if I realize that something's wrong, I can go back and edit it, go back to that screen and make them, oh, sorry, I think I pushed the wrong button because it went back to allow me to enter a new, but I think the button over to the right would have been the edit, so I'm just going to cancel. But I'll move on to the lab sample collection. So you can enter free text the sample ID that as the sampler you've assigned it. I don't know. Again, we have some defaulted values, but if you don't want that, you have our regular list that's applicable to collecting water samples and sediment samples. And as I mentioned before, we have our new collection depth that it can be arranged. So it can say that I started at a depth of 3 and ended at a depth of 5. And put in my name. If you have any comments, I can add those. And again, this is information that we can be marrying up with the chemistry data. And so you can select your sample type of whatever, we'll keep it as grab. And have the range of collection date. We'll say I started this at March 9th, and collection end of today. Cassandra?
I was curious, when you were putting the range of depths, is that still how it's going to, is that a constraint that links it to its chemistry? Because right now depth is part of the unique constraints that link a chemistry sample to the collection. So if you enter a range here, is that somehow have to get assigned in the chemistry template?
I don't think that's one of the
Yeah.
values that we are matching on.
Right. I don't think collection depth is no longer a primary key.
Okay.
So how would you link up the data then if you collected like a sample at 1 foot and a sample at 5 feet?
I think we're basing it on time, that we're assuming those would be at different times.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a difference because, I mean, the guidance for all these years have been to just use like one time across for all the events, the earliest time of your sampling. So that'd have to be clear.
Yeah, it's going to be a significant change for people to adapt to, but yes, we will need to advertise that widely.
Okay, so then I've finished that form. And then this new form, field observations. I think these again come from the swamp field collection form, and so we're looking to see if this would be helpful for a broader availability. Of course, these aren't required, so I could stop right there in my collection or not even have the lab collection subform. I could just take some field measurements and record those and stop there. But this subform allows you to give more information about what you might be seeing at the site, and has different options that have been again used in our swamp program. And so you can see them there. I won't go through all of them, but site odor, sky color, other presence, dominant substrate, water clarity, water odor, water color, evidence of fires, and then overland runoff, observed flow, and Beaufort wind force scale that people can fill out if they so desire. Cassandra?
Sorry, Jarma, I guess I didn't remove my hand. I'm sorry.
No problem. So again, we added them there for an optional field collection tool, but they wouldn't be required.
Marco.
And
forms,
so that's the forms as we have them set up right now. Marco.
Yeah. Hi, Jarma. Do these forms work offline, or do you have to have a internet connection or a
Marco,
signal?
did you have a question?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Marco.
We're not hearing you, Marco.
Oh,
I can.
I can hear it. I'm gonna send Jarma a message. I don't know what's going on.
Maybe we'll
yeah,
go
so I
on
think my
to
question
Adam
is, do
then.
these forms work offline?
Yes, they do.
Adam, are you? Oh.
Jarma, I don't know if Jarma,
Apparently you
but
guys could hear Marco.
yeah. Can you hear me, Jarma? Okay, I'll take that as a no.
I know. Like, what happened to Jarma?
But anyway, my question was going to be something that Jarma needed to do. I wanted to go back and look at lab sample collection, or like sample collection information for a lab sample. So it seems like we're missing sort of identifying characteristics that we currently have, and I'm curious where that information is going to go, or if it's just no longer good.
Adam, are you thinking of like fraction and forget what else is not on there? Are those some of the things you're thinking of, or which ones?
I'm thinking of more like collection device and location code, and maybe it's that it's a subform, so it inherits everything from the parent form, but then I'm thinking about sort of composite samples or samples collected over a trawl or something like that.
Okay,
Or
yeah,
maybe that
no,
doesn't.
we can, you're right, collection device is missing and which should be added on there. Somehow I knew this subform was missing things, but I just hadn't gone back and triple checked. Location code, yeah, why not? Okay, yeah. I think you're right. I think those are missing.
Because
In
it was
part,
just
we
when
had
we were looking.
yeah, the software people built the first version of this, and then we were editing, and so I think we just they were like, we already added this on the other one, but we hadn't noticed that it was missing here. So good catch.
Okay, because I'm just
Sorry.
trying to figure out like if the purpose of this form in that like you have this is like one event, and then hypothetically you would have like 6 samples in that
Right.
lab sample collection. Okay.
Or sorry, when you say 6 samples, are you thinking like 6 bottles, or what do you mean by that? Because so like
I mean,
you would so for an individual station, you know, you would fill this out, and then if you add a new station, then there would be like a new lab collection for that new station.
okay, so it's like I guess I'm thinking both, in that like currently yeah, so it's like you have your mercury bottle and your PCB bottle, so those would be 2 things. But then I'm also thinking that like right now we use the whole logical key, where it's things like location code and collection device and depth and stuff like, or not depth, but like to differentiate between multiple samples if there are multiple mercury samples taken, left bank, right bank, or whatever, at a single station, at a single event.
Okay, yeah.
It seems like, if I recall the general information, like the highest level, you had location code, but then the location subform is where you actually put like a lat long. And so going to Adam's example of left bank versus right bank, you'd have to have 2 high level entries starting at the general information, right?
Yeah, so can rethink that.
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to get at when I was like, does it just inherit everything from the parent form? So it's like I wasn't sure if it was split, and that so that's a choice where it's like you could have each location at a station has to have its own set of forms potentially. Right. You still have issues where it's like composites
for a single sample ID that goes to the lab comes from
Right.
multiple location codes, but maybe that's more of a tissue issue rather than, but sediment, because in sediment you have like multiple cores, right? Sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how they allow in terms of like subforms off of subforms, but right now the way it works is you have sample and then location has subforms off of that specific to each location. I don't know if Equus allows that type of hierarchy or if it's only like one master, one parent, and then just, you know, one set of child tables or forms to it.
So we have our general information, and then I think we can do a new form. So now there'll be 2 of this next layer of forms off of the general information. So you could have multiple children to one parent.
But it's still linked to the one location code, right? And the parent.
Yeah.
So I think that works if you're sampling like an area, like for CRAM, for example, where you set polygons. But if you're doing point sampling, where you're doing left bank versus right bank, you know, how do you differentiate samples taken from each of those? You'd have to create 2 parent records at currently.
Mm-hmm.
So we should.
Yeah, we can rethink that hierarchy.
Cassandra?
I guess one way to think about what you're showing is it's really changing it from kind of an event-driven model to a sample, because your highest level really defines your sample now. Is that correct? You're setting your date, time, location at that record level. Is the date time, I forget now, the date time is at this level, correct? If you'd scroll down.
No.
No.
It's at the sample, it's at the
sample. Date time is at
collection.
the sample collection.
Okay.
Or the field measure collection, or the field measure.
Right, yeah.
And, I guess it's an and. Field measure and lab collection.
Okay. Then I guess I don't really have I just trying to think through how it flows.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, just one other thing I kind of wanted to bring up. So like we had the field observations, which are kind of based on our swamp field data sheet that we use as a standard. And there's some other things on that field data sheet too that I didn't actually put in here yet, like the hydromodification type of stuff. So we're just kind of playing with options right now of like, we could just have a sub form that's kind of like swamp field observations and things. Or we can even have like a whole separate form, and if there's things we want that we might do to make required for swamp people. But yeah, I don't know if there's any feedback in terms of like, do you think people outside of swamp would be interested in filling in that information and having those options available, or maybe not? Like, so Jarma had shown before, you know, like kind of like the sky, is it clear or overcast? Water clarity, water odor, things like that. Like, are those things other groups may have interest in, or should we just label that swamp and take it out of this more general version?
Well, how would it work if you don't want to follow swamp? Would it just be open-ended where they would have to like manually enter their the analyze that they want to record?
No, I think they would just not fill this last subform out.
Right. Yeah, like, I mean, none of this is these are not required fields. I think we're sort of just debating, like, do we even include this? Because it's not part of the standard CEDEN field sheet right now. It's, just on the swamp template. So
Well,
just kind of, should we even make this available? Or should we just have a separate swamp form just for swamp? And
yeah, well, people see it and think, oh, there's so much to do. I'm just wanting to report my temperatures and that's
yeah.
it. But make it overwhelming. Stacey?
We do have data providers that do collect the field observation information in the CEDEN field template. So
Okay.
I do think it, you should have it available for people, because there are some programs out there that do collect that information.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, great.
Adam?
Two things I was going to say. Yeah, we definitely not even all of our projects, but we see other projects just sort of. I don't know if they think it's because they have to or because they find value in it, that collect this information. And then the other thing, you had mentioned that collection device and GPS device are no longer going to be controlled values, and I wasn't sure if that was because it doesn't really matter what type of or what model number YSI people are using to collect their samples, or if it was like causing too much of a headache. It seemed in particular for like field collection or like field results data. Some of the like in the field test kit kind of things, the collection device was kind of important. The specificity of it. So I was curious why it was going to free text.
Go ahead, Jarma.
I was just going to say that currently it seems more trouble than we're to manage that lookup and have people follow the business rules and when requesting new ones, and it just didn't seem more the cost of the time and energy used to do that wasn't worth what we were getting out of it.
Yeah, I guess I would just add, I guess we thought of it more as it's metadata that generally only the data provider would use. So if it's important to you, you fill it out. If you want to know which test kit or which YSI you were using, you would write it down. But for other folks who it doesn't seem that important, they don't have to have it controlled. And as far as I know, it's like no one, in terms of like water board's use of this data, we're not looking at that. I don't think it gets assessed in any way. So I guess, yeah, it was just if we don't need to control it, why would we?
Well, I think it comes into more like a querying and filtering issue. People are going to start entering like the same device multiple ways in their project just by typing different things over time. The other thing is I think it can become important if somebody's really questioning the quality of the data. If you're looking at data from a YSI versus like a handheld probe, I think there's a different quality of result based on what device you're using. So I think it is important in a way, and definitely for some instances.
Lisa?
I just was a little confused about why you have a field collection and a lab collection, and they seem to be the same. And you have required fields in both.
The field measurements are when you're like actually taking measurements out in the field. So you saw like pH and turbidity and things that I put actual numbers in, where the lab sample collection is just recording that I took a sample and I am sending it to the lab.
Oh, okay. I guess coming from the lab, I'm thinking that's our field person going out there and taking field measurements and collecting the samples. So that's where I was getting confused.
Well, they could do that. They could your lab person would go out and to the field, take the water temperature where they're there, and then record things about the sample that they collected to bring back to the lab.
Okay,
Lisa,
so in that case,
are you saying that? Okay, sorry.
Yeah, there were like fields in there, like the collection date and time. So they would have to match.
No.
No?
I mean, you would collect your water temperature at one time, and then you could collect your grab sample, fill your bottle to take to the lab at a different time.
Okay. That clears things up. Thank you.
Were you saying the title of lab sample collection made you think it's the lab going to collect the sample?
Yes.
Was that title
Yes.
confused? Okay, so I can work
Might
on
be
that
it might be the title.
Okay, I will work on that title.
All right, we're running out of time, so let's hear Adam and then Kelly.
I was just gonna ask the group for collection device on chemistry or lab samples, however we end up calling those. Does it the size of the grab on a sediment sample, or like I don't know, it just feels weird to go from a field that was like part of the logical key to like totally uncontrolled. But maybe I'm placing more value on it than others are. So I just was curious in the sort of lab sample context if people found value in it.
I guess one thing I would just say is this isn't replacing your COC. So there's stuff you would put on a COC that we don't always collect here, but I see what you're saying. You're giving us a lot of good food for thought, and that we really need to test this and actually walk through it with sample collection.
Kelly?
I was just curious with the lab sample collection as well, because I think of lab sample as having results coming from the lab, and so I'm not following what we're doing here when we won't have the results because they haven't been to the lab yet. I'm just a little confused by the purpose of this field.
Go ahead, Tessa.
Yeah, so you're just describing when you collected the sample. It doesn't have results to it. You're just saying, I collected a grab sample at this time, or whatever type of sample it is. And we do request this information now of people in the field. So it's just basically saying where and how you collected the sample, and then you send it to the lab, and the lab, sends the results in separately.
So it's just kind of to flag that if you're looking at the field data, that if you're looking at it in CEDEN, the field data would have a field that would indicate that there was additional information related to that sample that would not be in the field part. You would have to go to the lab part to query.
Yeah. And like currently how our system works is like you kind of need this collection system in the system to then like attach those lab results to. So it's sort of like creating the place, and then the lab results come in and, join on.
Thank you.
All right, I think we are at time. So thanks for giving us a lot of good comments. We will be
Yeah.
working on those.
We'll bring this back again, probably
Yeah.
like 5 times.
I will hang on for Cassandra to ask her question, but thanks again for joining, and hopefully see you next time.
Thanks,
Cass?
Thank you.
Dharma. I wanted to backtrack just really quickly to the AQT. By moving it to a different server, is that going to extend the life of it? I know we were thinking in the back of our heads it's going to go away potentially sooner rather than later. Is this just kind of a stopgap?
Yeah, so it was needing to go for infrastructure stuff, it needed to go to that other server, and so we didn't the DIT wasn't sure that it would make it that step of upgrading it to be able to go onto that server, if that would work, and it was successful. So this just extends it for now. We still have
Okay.
the issue that some of the pieces that are used in it aren't supported anymore. So if something goes wrong, we can't go to the companies and ask for support. And so it's still a little like not in a great situation, but at least it's not immediate that it's there's a problem.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.